Hi everyone, my name is Abigail Khan, and this is my presentation on terahertz radiation. Specifically, its uses on the brain, but we'll also dive a little deeper and talk about some other applications for it for Biology 103. So without further ado, I would like to show you all the table of contents that I have made here. So basically, what I'll be talking about today is I'm going to introduce terahertz waves to you guys, and I'll define it for you. We'll also talk about the science of how it works, where research began, how it was discovered, where research is today in terms of medical uses and biotechnological uses. Then we'll talk about some applications as well as some potentials for the future, and the ethics of using terahertz radiation on humans. So without further ado, let's get into the introduction here. So essentially what terahertz radiation is it's an electromagnetic radiation that uses frequencies between 0.1 and 10 terahertz, and these frequencies directly correspond with wavelengths between 3 micrometers and 30 micrometers. Something really cool about terahertz radiation is that it is non-invasive and non-iodizing, which means that it can't break chemical bonds. So it's deemed relatively safe for humans to use in lower frequencies. When we get into higher frequencies, there's still some concern about it not being as safe for the body, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. So terahertz radiation on the electromagnetic wave spectrum falls between microwaves and infrared. And it has a lot of potential in the biomedicine field for treatments for different neurological disorders like Alzheimer's disease, because what this does is it can promote different structures to form within cells, and it also can promote different functions for those cells, as well as changing different proteins within the body. So next up we have the science and how it works. So terahertz interacts with the low frequency vibrations within molecules, especially hydrogen bonds in different biological systems, and it causes different structural changes and in proteins and their function, which can potentially alter gene expression itself in different cellular processes within the body. So some effects of using terahertz radiation on the body can include protein conformation, DNA stability, it changes these things, and membrane permeability. So next up, we have this little infographic here that shows up at the top, it kind of shows the different wavelengths on the electromagnetic spectrum. And further below, we see the different things that terahertz does to different proteins, genes, DNA, and cells within the body. So, kind of interesting. And now we'll talk about where research began, who invented it, and stuff like that. So, way long ago, 175 years ago or so, there was this guy named Heinrich Hertz, and he's actually the person who discovered the electromagnetic field, essentially. He discovered what electromagnetic waves were, and when he was doing this, he discovered that there was a gap between microwave and infrared, which later became called the terahertz range, after his name, of course. And various fields have been studying this since, but particularly there was a lot of development with technology between the 1970s and the 1990s, and even now. Back when this was first discovered, the technology just lacked enough to actually do proper research on it and to know that there were biomedical applications for this. There's also this guy named Daniel, and I'm going to butcher this last name, but Grachowski, and he's said to be the pioneer of terahertz technology. He invented the terahertz time domain spectroscopy, efficacy. I don't know how to say that word. But it's a technology that is used in hundreds of different labs all across the world. So, and then now we'll talk about how far research has come today. So there hasn't been a ton of alteration to the technology itself, aside from making imaging services more affordable, more available. It's more widely researched now. There were some challenges with it being funded for research, because it's a part of metaphysical practices, actually, to use terahertz waves, like terahertz sound waves specifically. And so for a long time, a lot of people believed it to be pseudoscience. But we're discovering now that there are actually a lot of medical applications and other applications for terahertz radiation. So some clinical uses include different screenings for things like cancer and imaging for cancer, screening for diabetes, and because terahertz radiation changes cell structure and function and can even promote apoptosis within cells that need it, it can be potentially used for a number of neurological disorders, like we talked about earlier, like Alzheimer's disease. So there's a large potential for use of terahertz radiation in the field of neuroscience coming up here soon. So here on the right, we see the MRI imaging, and then in the middle here is terahertz imaging of a brain affected by a tumor on the top, and then one that is not on the bottom. So next, we're going to talk about the different applications of terahertz radiation. So currently, these are just a number of ways that we're using it. So like I discussed earlier, we're using imaging. So terahertz waves can penetrate through things without, like I said earlier, damaging chemical bonds or breaking chemical bonds, and so that is why it's ideal for imaging services. So we can see tumors in the brain and the body. It's being used a lot in actually like the neck head area right now. Like I said before too, it can also be used for neurological disorders. So there's actually been a couple studies done on animals that have found that terahertz therapy can improve cognitive function. So it supports memory and critical thinking and problem-solving skills, which is something that could potentially be really useful for people who are struggling in those areas. And it does so by changing cell structure and function and altering proteins and DNA. But there are some other fields too that use terahertz waves. So they're used in like agriculture to detect like spoilage and contamination in food services. It's used in astronomy to detect planets and determine their distance, and even sometimes I believe their temperature as well. And it's also used in like forensics and stuff too. So there's plenty of applications for it aside from medicine as well. So here are just some different diseases and the applications for terahertz and what terahertz could do to help somebody who's struggling with these diseases. So, and then here's another one that just kind of shows how it's been applied in neuroscience, the different areas that it's been applied to. And then next, we're going to talk about the ethics of it. So there is a potential for overexposure to terahertz radiation, but low-frequency terahertz therapy has been deemed safe for humans by experts. So some would say yes, because terahertz is non-ionizing, and it's also absorbed by water molecules really easily. So again, it doesn't break chemical bonds. And it's shown that it's a safer form of radiation than other forms of radiation. But we also still don't know a ton about terahertz radiation and how they alter cells long term. So there's that. And yeah, that's my presentation. If you have any questions for me, please drop them below. And if you guys are interested, the next couple slides here are going to be my sources. So I have my photos, articles, more articles. Thanks for watching.